Outnumbered overtime. OT, baby.
OT.
Can we have this conversation online?
I would love
Okay, let's
to.
talk about it.
Yeah.
Because what Eboni and I were talking about is kind of how we ended Outnumbered Overtime, the TV version of us. Mm-hmm. And you were saying that the person that you're dating right now feels kind of disconnected because he doesn't have a cultural connection.
Yes. Yeah, so he's a white American man from New Orleans. To the extent he has culture, it's that New Orleans thing, that NOLA thing's over.
Can he cook?
He actually can. He just got a smoker.
Him.
He did some brisket over the weekend, and he won his law firm's cookie bake-off challenge. Anyway,
all right. I was thinking etouffee, but anyway,
bragging
go on.
about him. But no, when we talk about cultural and identity and what legacies and things like that we would pass on if we were to have a family together. It's something he expressed to me, and I'd never heard it articulated like this. But he's not Jewish. He's not, of notable Italian or any other kind of rich cultural distinction that you might think of. And he says, I don't feel like I have culture. And I was like, wow. So, much of the class we were discussing in the last block seemed absurd in a way, but for me, it didn't seem that far-fetched. I would not run away from a discussion around the cultural of whiteness in America and whiteness in the world.
So,
not demonizing
Meghan,
it by any stretch.
You were leading this block on, was it the University of Colorado in Denver, right?
Yes.
That had the problem with whiteness course that you could take for the diversity part of your curriculum. Like you get 3 course credits from it. And so that was the context of this conversation. And I just thought what you were saying was fascinating. I mean, I guess I just sort of assume that everybody's got some sort of touchstone. You and I grew up military, and you did too. So I've always kind of felt like I'm part of that family. I'm also black. I'm, a lot of different things. So I don't really.
I think that's important, though, Harris, is because you have and first of all, I want to say I think we use the word privilege way too narrowly. It's a privilege.
Yeah, because my husband's white, and he says he can't figure out where the privileges come.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I know
like
I'm black, and I have a lot of privilege, and it sounds like what you're describing here is to have all these opportunities for connectedness in the way you see yourself and value. That's a blessing.
I also think we get too caught up with privilege and don't bring in socioeconomic factors.
And that's a huge
that
privilege
means more than anything.
Of course, that's
to do with
privilege.
Race.
Of course,
obviously, Jaden Smith is going to have a different experience than someone growing up in the inner city of Chicago.
I can with my hair, though.
Everyone has privileges and disadvantages, and you shouldn't have to feel guilty about all the privileges you have.
That's a great point.
The problem with classes like that, and you do so much campus reform, is that I think it stifles communication and discussions.
Absolutely.
Because people feel guilty and like, I can't talk about it because I'm already the problem.
Have you taken one of these classes, one of these kind of culturally diverse classes?
I've sat in on different,
Did you?
Because I had some really rich conversations. What did you experience?
Yeah, I went to some of the more radical camps and gatherings, which is like a now affiliated group, and it was kind of it was with the pronouns. You're supposed to ask everybody their pronouns every couple of minutes because they could change. It was, and if you went, item by item, you're like, nobody's right or nobody's wrong. There's no disagreement, no disagreements. Listen to everybody, and then there was like, but these things are wrong. It comes to a point where you're trying so hard to be politically correct that you're no longer making sense. You can have the discussion, but when you get to the point where it's hard to have a discussion because you're so afraid of somebody being offended or not even knowing how you might offend somebody, that's when it becomes a problem.
She writes really interesting pieces for National Review on it. I mean, you did one, I remember, where people were offended that sushi was
sushi, because it was bad sushi. So it was cultural appropriation because it wasn't the way that, sushi's made in Japan. It was just cafeteria sushi. Cafeteria food's generally bad food. They said this cultural appropriation, it's an insult. So, it's like, no, it's just bad cafeteria food.
Maybe it's generational. I don't know. Back in my day, I was in school in the early 2000s. I got to tell you, Meghan, I had some of the most rich and vibrant, respectful moments of, learning and disagreement and everything.
I have given... I mean, I can't even begin to count how many speeches on college campuses. I now take the Jerry Seinfeld approach. I won't do it anymore. I had a very negative experience at Reed College where I told the people afterward, I don't know why you even invite conservatives because clearly they aren't even open to hearing it. The student body was very reactive and very, I don't need to go into too much detail, but it was a very, very uncomfortable experience for me. And I have found, much like Jerry Seinfeld and many other comedians, that I don't feel connected as being a millennial in the sense that I'm not offended by everything. And I went to Columbia. I listened to nothing but leftist, liberal stuff my entire college career, and I didn't have a meltdown, and I'm still okay.
Sorry that happened,
but I don't.
Meghan.
That's okay. I had
okay.
too many experiences on college campuses over and over again, and I told my speaking agent, I was like, it's just life is too short for this. And it's interesting that so many comedians and other public speakers have kind of been like, they're just too easily offended, and they don't want to have a discussion.
So what are these people going to be like in the real world where there are no safe spaces houses and people that they can bully off the stage, and they can only hear the opinions that marry theirs. And
they're going to have trouble unless they work in certain places in Manhattan or San Francisco or whatever.
Or in their own house.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
On Thursday, I forgot which stop it was during the thank you tour, Donald Trump talked about making patriotism, bringing back patriotism. And that kind of brings back the question of assimilation versus acculturation, right? And can people keep the identity of who they were as immigrants when they came here, but also immerse themselves into being an American, particularly a patriotic American, versus assimilation, which it sounds like has happened to your boyfriend, perhaps over a long stretch of generations. I don't know how long their family has been here.
Sure.
Maybe they lost that.
He knows.
But in New York, Italians are proud to be Italians. Irish are proud to be Irish. Puerto Ricans are proud to be Puerto Ricans.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's something I think permeates in New York. But you have a lot of places where it's a big question, and also it's a big question, of course, for our policies when people come to this country now. To what extent do we do? Because even a lot of folks don't realize the Pledge of Allegiance was designed to help the last tranche of kids who came here from Europe, particularly the Italians. They brought in they believed in the politicalization of anarchism. So we had to make them pledge allegiance to the flag every single day of this country. The Pledge of Allegiance was altered several times, ultimately to make sure that people were citizens of Americans first, and then perhaps you keep your culture, your cooking, some customs, some things like your
and
weddings.
an overarching part of that was a monotheistic belief in God, which is why it's where it is on our money and in the Pledge of Allegiance and so on and so forth. So Trouble 2K, I wonder if that's his real name, on the live chat writes, so Fox is still going with the war on education, I see. It's interesting, because whenever we talk about this issue, no, and I'm liking comments that I want to get into the conversation because I think it's important to talk about. It actually, I don't feel like we're going against education with our discussion, although we had differing points of view. But as a mom with kids in elementary school, I just want them to be exposed to everything. Yeah. Like, I don't want kids in the class based on their race or religion or anything else to be separated from my kids to learn about privilege and all of that. Because in a way, that's just backdooring segregation. I guess that's how I feel. So to Trouble 2K, I'm not at war with education. I'm in love with education. Sure. I just want it all to be all inclusive.
And are we not sitting on this couch having a conversation?
And thank you for your comment, by the way.
It was a great one, but of 4 different perspectives on this, and we're coming at it from our different vantage points. I think that's the beauty of it to me. It's why one of the reasons I love working here, is the diversity of thought and experience and perspective that we each bring. And to the point of assimilation, Charles, I was in Israel last week, and we spent time with Ethiopian Jews, many of whom had come to Israel like in 84, 85.
I remember.
Sure. And so they're now, many of them my age, early 30s. And they were talking about how difficult that process was for them because they wanted more than anything in the world to be Israeli citizens, and for that to be their first choice of identity. They were proud Jewish Israelis, but they were also Ethiopian. And so maintaining that sense of cultural identity, it's what Du Bois calls, duality. And it's challenging, but I think that's the sweet spot.
So when they were in their camps in Ethiopia and they were waiting to be taken someplace else. Obviously, Israel was one of their choices and would have been their first choice as they were keeping Judaism inside their homes. What's interesting is the first Ethiopian Miss Israel was, I think, 2013. And when you talk with her and hear her story about the things that they were doing in those camps to make sure that their culture stayed with them, the conversations they were having, it's really, it's delicious. And I would imagine it was what was happening on the ships on their way to Ellis Island. It's, keep this part of us sacred. It's what happened. We know where it wasn't happening.
To get very macro on this, it's important to me. We had Julie Rodzinski on the show right after the election, and she said, I fully admit I live in a bubble. So many of us in the media do. And I was like, au contraire. I go home to Arizona as much as possible. I shoot guns. I drink beer. You and I have talked about this because you're from Detroit.
Right.
And I think it's important to also stay connected to your roots and where you're from, especially if you're going to be analysts on television, because it's obviously influencing your perspective.
Or go out and volunteer somewhere, take a trip. There's so many opportunities. If you don't do anything, you'll stay in the bubble. But if it's up to you. If you go out there, if you do go home, stay in touch with your family, your friends from other places from home, then it's up to you to actively look outside the bubble.
I like this. Tom Poulin says it is actually a privilege to be an American.
Of course
Amen.
it is.
That's everybody.
Of course it is.
I love our viewers.
Oh, yeah.
I really do, and I love the fact that they get on the live chat.
Somebody tweeted all of the ladies on the couch today a giant bouquet of roses pictures saying, roses for the ladies. And I was like, well, isn't that
give you
so-
one of my
Hey, what about me?
You got your rose.
Your chopped liver.
Oh, you like my little booty? My wife hand makes those.
That's so
You're
beautiful.
kidding.
Yeah, she makes
Stunning.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have a lot of love on the live chat. Thank
Good.
you. And I'm
Thank
going to
you.
quote
Thank
a
you. I
guy
can't
here.
wait to go.
He loves the way you do the numbers
Oh.
in the afternoon. You called it 20,000 by the end of the week.
That's
we'll
right.
see it
That's
happen
right.
for the
We're
Dow
making some
Jones
money. This is the
Industrial
Trump
Average.
rally. He's going to keep going.
All right. Ebony, thanks for being here. Kat, thanks for being here. All right. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.